Hey everyone, good morning. I hope you've had an awesome week here. It's Friday, and I'm very excited because here in just a minute we're going to be talking live with Coach Julia Seal about 4 toxic behaviors um, that cause a lot of problems in relationships. We're going to have one topic each day over the next 4 days into these topics to learn how to identify them, how to stop them in our lives. And Julia's here. She should be joining any second. There you are. Hi, Julia.
Yeah, yeah.
How are you?
I'm fine. Hi, everyone. It's Friday, almost Friday evening here. So
Man,
hopefully
time
the
is
end of all
flying.
conflict.
Yeah, I don't know if it's happening for you, but time is flying. I feel like I blinked my eyes and November was gone. And I'm hoping December is like a little bit more, a little bit slower paced, but let's see.
Yeah, I think also a lot of people in the States were talking about, Thanksgiving felt quite late and it's like one thing after another. So it
Yes.
is whatever cropped up at Thanksgiving relationship wise is just escalating before Christmas.
Yeah, and I think it gives us a chance to be really, really aware and like a bite-sized dose before we get into these, more extended holidays in December of, okay, what do we need to keep our eyes and our hearts open to, and how can we kind of show up in a in the most positive, powerful way that we can, kind of given our capabilities and situations. So I'm excited to talk to you today. Before you came on, I had like 30 seconds, and I was like, all right, the next 4 days are dedicated to talking about 4 toxic behaviors, right? That show up in relationships and then either create conflict, really, right? Tell us a little more about how, these 4 behaviors kind of at an overview level and how they tie into relationships.
Yeah, I think the first thing really, most of us hear the word conflict and we kind of go, oh, don't want conflict, right? So
Yeah.
it's important to realize that conflict is kind of something that's going to exist in every relationship. And so some kind of conflict is actually really healthy because we're not
Mhm.
all the same, right?
Right.
So everybody has their own dreams, their own wishes, their own way of doing things. And so you minute you're in relationship with someone, there is going to be a but because basically we're not getting our own way, right? So we're gonna butt heads. But what I want to talk about these over these 4 days is what we refer to in the coaching world as the poisonous conflict behaviors, right? Or the
Okay.
toxic conflict behaviors, because these ones have been identified as if they run rife in a relationship, they actually spell disaster because they
Yeah.
start to break down the relationship. And then there's almost like no coming back from it. I know I spoke about this in a previous session with you, but from my work in employee engagement, it's really useful to remember that the research is showing us, and it's research by Gallup, that the effect of a disengaged employee at work or a negative person who doesn't want to be in the company,
Mm.
who's kind of doing a lot of these toxic behaviors within their job, they have a 9 times effect on their colleagues than a positive
Yeah.
person. So
Yeah.
that's how powerful they are. So now you bring that into your family relationships. Now, family, yes, we might bar someone from coming to our home if things have got really bad, but family's around forever.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so I think it's helpful for us to look at these kind of the more toxic behaviors because there's all kinds of things we can do to neutralize them, either if we're doing them, and most of the time we won't even admit if we're doing them, or if we're kind of part of it and
Hmm.
we're intertwined in the dynamic, which happens a lot in families because we've got history, right?
Right.
Or if
Yeah.
we're just seeing it from other people, what can we do about it? you know.
Yeah.
So that's, I want to look at those four particularly because I think they can really help us between now and Christmas if we get our
Right.
heads around.
Yeah, yeah, and this time is when we have to have those relationships in our face because the holidays brings us together, and a lot of us are blessed to have family members that we love and we enjoy and get along with most of the time. But there's always, almost always, at least one or two relationships in there that can be a little tense and make things a little hard. And you and I have talked about before how it feels like even in these times of disposable relationships, quick media, like we see someone that doesn't agree with our political view, with our, I don't know, a life choice or another, and it's almost like we're being told all the time, cut the people off, cut them out, cut them out. And what I think is really interesting about what you're saying is that robs us of an opportunity to really both go deeper within ourselves and to create a deeper, more meaningful relationship with others by not just running away every time someone takes an opposing viewpoint on a topic that maybe from like a moral or ethical perspective is important, but maybe doesn't affect our day-to-day relationship with a person. So I don't know if we'll get into that or not over these 4 days, but I love your point of view on that from what we've talked about before, because I think it's such a contrast to what we hear over and over and over again, kind of in current consumable, rapid, fast media sources.
Yeah, and I think, in all, I mean, I've passed menopause, right? And what I'm looking back on my life saying, well, what are the patterns in my relationships? The same people, the same types of people, the same kind of unhealthy conflict just kept showing up and showing
Yeah.
up and showing up until I was prepared to sit with it for longer and address it. So it is great to sort of say, oh, this person's got negative energy, just get rid of them. But actually in coaching, people don't have an effect on us, right? We have an effect on us. And this is what's so interesting. If someone triggers you, that's what I want to really talk about
Yeah.
in our coaching, is because that isn't true, right? It's
Yeah.
what you're thinking and feeling about that situation, the words that they're saying that are triggering you, because, it will trigger you, but it won't trigger someone else. So
Yeah.
it's neutral to someone else. So, that we can talk about in more detail
Cool.
because that's a little deeper. But these toxic behaviors, we're working at the behavior level right now. So these are kind of actions that we can take. Then they are useful for conflict, unhealthy conflict in the moment. And then they invite us to start looking at what's underneath
Yeah.
and to go that little bit deeper about the other person, what's going on for the other person, which brings a level of understanding and possibly even compassion. And then what's actually going on underneath for us. And then that's the exciting stuff, right, to work with in coaching, because like you were saying, I always talk about step into what's the most difficult, because that's your greatest growth. But
Yeah.
if you get there, it's also your greatest happiness and your real whole being happiness. So, always that's the invitation, is to go where
Yeah.
it
Where
doesn't
it's
feel
sticky.
good. Yeah.
I want to take a second and just welcome and say thanks for everybody that's watching. I see some great friends there listening in. It's good to see you guys. Feel free to throw anything in the comments around this topic. So today, let's see the 4 toxic behaviors that we are going to talk about over the next 4 days, just to give a little intro, are criticism, blame, contempt, and then sulking and defensiveness. And today we're really going to focus on criticism, how it shows up in others, how it shows up in ourselves, right? And then how to both identify that and dissolve and move kind of through it so it doesn't have that power, like you're mentioning, kind of over us or over the relationship. Thanks, Lisa. She gives us some claps. Thanks, Laura.
And I'm
Thank you,
also
friend.
clapping. I
Cool.
chose this one to start with because this one is actually my most difficult one and has been the most challenging for me. So, if you think about all of these and you think about, so there's criticism, blame, defensiveness, which is the other side of criticism, sulking and stonewalling, and then the last one is contempt, which is kind of the worst of the lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, and you think about for yourself, what gives you that, like you just don't even want to be in those situations. You want to, like, for me, it's definitely criticism. I don't know, what do you think it is for you? Which is probably the most tough for you or triggers
For
you the most?
when I receive it, when I'm on the receiving end of it, honestly, for me, it's contempt, because I find something when I'm experiencing contempt from someone else, I feel almost like my humanity is denied, like I'm invisible as a being, and that triggers some of my deepest wounds, I think. So the other ones, I mean, I don't enjoy any of them, obviously, but contempt is the one that really just hits me personally.
Yeah, so that's good. So if anyone else wants to tell us what's going on for you, which of those four are horrible, let us know. And we are going to get to all of them over the next four
Yeah, over
days.
the
And
next 4 days.
hopefully, yeah, so hopefully these are very useful in, like I said, in the moment things you can do, but they are actions. We have not gone, we're not going deeper into what's really going on, but we are opening it up a little bit and softening it a little bit more.
Mhm.
And really, Jamie, where we need to get to with any conflict type situation in order for conflict to be useful to us is we have to move. And I use this terminology a lot on the podcast. So I don't know if any of you follow Happiness Matters in Midlife, but you'll see my coaching tools on the podcast. And I talk a lot about moving from being reactive to being responsive. Because when we're in reactive, we have gone into a fight or flight way of being, right? Our body and our brain, our primitive brain, is seeing us being under threat. So that is when, like, someone criticizes me and my heart starts going, or I can feel my pulse go. I am actually in reactive mode before I've even done anything, right? So my body
Yeah.
is now going into survival mode. So it's really useful to look for your red flags to know when you're actually in that reactive mode. So for me, if there's a tightening in my chest and I often take my heart rate because I can feel it going.
Wow. Okay. That's a lot of awareness to actually notice in your
Yeah,
body. So is that one of the ways that we start to connect with when these things are happening, to become more self-aware so we can respond instead of react?
yeah, yeah. Because
Yeah.
we're not, some of what we might, from this live, for example, you might pick one idea that's going to be really useful to you and you can apply it. But it's quite difficult to apply any of these tips if you are still in reactive mode.
Makes sense.
So it is this shift from reactive to responsive. And I'm more going to talk about this and how do we get there in every single live, because that is the secret to everything, really.
All right. Tell
You
us
know,
about it. Let's get into it. That's good.
yeah. So I think, actually this week's podcast is about the vagus nerve. Which is kind of has a lot to do with our rest and our parasympathetic nervous system. So rest and rejuvenation and tend and befriend and sort of recuperate and heal. It's all of that. So things like meditation and deep breathing activate that. And our sympathetic nervous system that's in the zone when we are reactive and under threat. Now we need that, right? We do need it. It's always a dynamic balance between the two. It's just if you're sitting at the dinner table, do you need to be in fight or
Right.
flight? Probably not.
Yeah. Yeah. Hopefully not. And if so, that would be
Yeah.
be a
So,
problem. Great.
even if you're doing something as simple as noticing your breathing when someone says something that you see as criticism, just notice that you probably can't breathe and to just take one breath, or to look at the sky, or just anything that just breaks that reactive mode and gives that tiny little pause for you to get into the responsive mode.
Okay, that's a good tip. Well, let's talk about criticism as one of these toxic behaviors and get into that a little bit. It would be I think interesting. I mean, we all have an idea what criticism feels like. That's for sure. Maybe we're a little bit less aware of when we're doing it. We might think, oh, but our good intentions, it doesn't hit the other person like criticism. So maybe you could start by just giving us a really basic framework around what this behavior looks like. Kind of, yeah.
So criticism is actually, it's really a complaint, okay, from someone else or from you, but let's talk about when it's coming from someone else. Someone is complaining, and it's the best way to just think of it is it's an unskillful complaint about something that they really care about,
Oh,
or it's
wow.
an skillful attempt to give you feedback. Now,
That is
complaints,
beautiful.
yeah,
Yeah, because that takes
complaints
the
are
malice out of
normal,
it.
right? Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
complaints are normal. Like I said, we are going to complain all the time. It's healthy. It's part of just being different types of people in the world. The unskillful piece comes in. So it's useful, remember, it's about feedback and it's about complaining about something that the other really cares about. But it's unskillful. And it's
Yeah.
unskillful because they're delivering it not just as a complaint about something or about your behavior, but it's got a whole lot of negative words about your character or your personality,
Mm-hmm.
right? So there's an attack about you,
Right.
and
Which is part of unskillful.
and that's part of the unskillful. So to
Mm-hmm.
unpack it, you want to unpack it into a complaint. It's an unskillful complaint, but the add-on are these critical words, these negative things about you that are added on, or that
Right.
we are saying to other people that are added on.
Right. And that's almost like a judgment in a way, making it personal and, yeah, judging the other person's maybe intent or capacity in the midst of the criticism.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think that to respond to that, if it's happening to you, the very first thing you can do is just notice the impact that that has on you, right? So like I said about the react respond, because it's going to hurt. Sometimes it's like being punched in the stomach, right? When someone criticizes you. But then start noticing that like they're trying to say something, they're trying to complain about something, either something that you've done or something that's going on in the situation, and they're just doing it really badly. So the best,
It's
the best
helpful
thing
to
to
think about
do,
it. I can see
yeah,
how helpful it is just to think about it that way, because it makes it impersonal a little bit more.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And there's a huge difference between complaint and criticism, right?
Yeah.
That's the difference. So what we want to do when we're facing that is turn criticism back into a complaint. So the trick is, and this is why you need to be feeling slightly calm,
Yeah.
is to start asking questions for clarity so that you
Mm.
can understand what the other person is trying to say with the criticism.
Mm. Sure. And that can be hard to not react to the perceived attack, or real attack, maybe in some ways through the words, to take that space and step back. So that's where some of these neutralizing mechanisms come in of deep breath, or that you were saying, doing like a minute, just a moment meditation kind of thing to be able to respond.
Yeah, absolutely. And so a great example is on the computer with emails, right? Or on
Mm.
social media. That's a really good place to practice the pause,
Okay.
because the pause allows you to suddenly go, oh, this is actually an unskillful complaint. What can I do? I could ask a question to ask more information.
Mm-hmm.
And, so think about when social media started and we just used to flame back an email rant, or you
Yeah.
still see it on social media,
Right.
immediate. So when we're online and when we by email, just don't respond. If you notice that emotional response,
Mm-hmm.
don't, just wait.
Mm-hmm.
And then you'll know. I mean, I think most of us are doing that. We will then either not even respond or we'll be more skillful. In the moment, if it's happening at the dinner table, is breath, right? Is breath, or to take another bite of food and get that down your throat. And so that is, honestly, in coaching, this is where we spend a lot of time, is inserting the pause moment between your reaction and your response. Because it, like you say, it's not easy. Like we
Sure.
just immediately, and we're wired to just get that immediate. I mean, our survival brain is wired. We're hot-wired to react.
That makes sense. Yeah. I have a question there for you. I don't know if those who are watching live, again, if you guys have any questions, feel free to put them in the comments. And if you're watching on replay, you can leave a comment as well. We can get back to those in writing. But I'm thinking, it seems like that is a great skill or way to react when you have someone that maybe says something offhanded, or it's not in their character to consistently come for you and attack you with criticism. What happens when you have someone in your family or a relationship, you know, again, that is one of those permanent ones that they're going to be around in our lives, who just consistently is critical as almost their way of relating to you on a day-to-day basis? Do these tools still work, or at what point do boundaries or other topics come in that we would need to look for a different kind of reaction?
Yeah, so I would suggest that to practice neutralizing over and over again, right? So practice starting to ask questions, starting to understand where the other person is coming from. It neutralizes criticism. Okay. And that has a spiral on effect on the relationship going forward, because suddenly you're going from, let's say, one negative interaction, which has massive impact, to possibly one negative and one positive interaction. And so the relationship starts to shift. And remember that the person, it's an unskillful complaint. So the minute they realize they're being heard, because you're asking for more information, right? And you're asking for more clarity, and you're not attacking them back. It neutralizes it. I mean, it's like magic. And I know you're all probably going, yeah, right, that's not going to work. I promise you. This is my bugbear, so I know it works, all right?
Right.
But there are some other tips and tricks, right? You know, you could don't ever criticize back and say you. Use the words, instead of saying you doing this, just that I feel this. So you can yourself respond to a complaint in a non-blame complaint way. So not to escalate it. But to get to your story, your thing on boundaries, and I have very different views on boundaries, right? My advice is to have as few boundaries as possible, and keep your boundaries to your physical safety. And if you can't do that, if you need many more, then you need to come and talk to us about coaching.
Yeah, we've talked about that in another conversation.
Yeah. I mean, we've had that conversation. Yeah,
because we may have to talk about that in another one, though, because it is interesting the way you look at that. We may not have time today to get into it, but that is a good one, a very good one.
And it's useful. We can talk about this in other sessions about power, right? Because when there's a toxic behavior, we suddenly take up, we're either in a position of power, or we're feeling powerless, and then we all react because we're feeling powerless. And that whole victim persecutor triangle starts. So you then victimize, or you persecute the other person, and so there's just this ongoing thing. And so the trick is to really, really find out what's going on around that complaint. So to ask the questions. And if someone's consistently like that, you will also just realize they are so unskilled at complaining about something, and that just your asking for more information is growing their skill because what they're needing to learn is how to make a skillful request.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. You're actually training them as you opt out of falling into a different toxic behavior to respond to the criticism, like you said, defensiveness, blame, contempt, even by stepping back and using empathy to ask a question or compassion to understand where they're coming from. It trains the other person in a way to then become more skillful, like you're saying, to make a request of what they really want or need.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of, we're training them without them realizing. But, you know, that's what I say. That's what neutralizes that toxic behavior, is just digging a little bit deeper. And if you are feeling all those those feelings, the emotions, and your body's feeling out of control, but you have to sit where you're sitting because you're at the dinner table, you know, see if you could just drop into something simple as, can you tell me a little bit more? So not even trying to be too smart about, you're trying to teach them about a skillful request or anything like that. Because the reason why you're picking it up as toxic behavior, because you are being triggered, because someone else might not be. So, you know, so you are like, you need to like be loving yourself first. So if all you can get out is, oh, you know, that's really interesting. Can you tell me a little bit more?
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
I can see how disarming that would be
Yeah.
in a very good way. All right, let's shift the conversation a little bit in the direction of what happens and what are your tips and recommendations for when we are the ones being critical? Because I'm sure, again, whether we're listening live or people are catching the replay, and no matter how enlightened and evolved we are, there are moments when we're going to fall into these toxic behaviors. I'm sure every one of us in one situation or another, as much as we want to avoid them. So how can we identify that within ourselves? How can we understand ourselves better so that we're showing up less and less with these kind of toxic behaviors, especially criticism, since that's our topic today?
Yeah. So there's some actions, really like basic actions that I'll talk to now, because those will be useful. Like I said, actions. But the deeper thing is we want to start understanding what are the afflictive emotions that are driving that behavior.
Okay.
And so we can look at those, you know, those afflictive emotions, whether it's anger or jealousy, and that would be work that we do in coaching. And then even more than that, we would then start looking at where do those emotions actually come from, and start looking at that and working with that. But for today is, again, if you are brave enough to admit that sometimes you do it, got to remember that that you're doing an unskillful complaint, one portion, and the other portion is you actually are attacking the other person's personality. So what you want to do is split them off. So stop saying you make me crazy, you shouldn't say this, you should have packed the dishwasher, you know, bloody idiot because you didn't pack the dishwasher, you know, whatever. Take the you out of it, right?
Right.
And start practicing the complaint bit. How to make a better complaint, how to skillfully complain, which is how to make a skillful request. Now, there's a couple of components in making a skillful request, but the key one is start with please. That helps.
Sure, but it does. Yep. Basic stuff. Sometimes the most profound solutions are the most basic things that we just forget to do consistently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the trick is to be really specific. So, you know, please would you pack the dishwasher by 8 o'clock this evening before everyone leaves? And then you have to wait for their agreement. Because a skillful request, right, is not a request until they've agreed.
Makes sense.
Because that's what makes us so mad so much, right? We put out, especially as women, we put out these sort of subtle requests that are not very clear. And then we get mad.
Mm. Then the other side is the ultimatum, which is also not a skillful request, I imagine.
No, no.
Yes.
And yeah, you know, ultimatums and boundaries are things you have to follow up on. You know,
Yeah.
so an ultimatum, if you're giving someone an ultimatum, you know, like if you do this, I'm going to do X, then you're going to have to do it. And do you really want to do it?
Right. Right. Yeah, it can become a tool for almost control, because I hear in a lot of things you're saying that there is somewhere in there within criticism a root of control, either the outcome that you want or the behavior of the person, or your own, like you're saying, like a boundary that's almost so rigid that it's missing some heart to it or soul to it.
And I think this is where we get into trouble all the time, right? Is
Yeah.
this dynamic of power and powerlessness. It's about control.
Yeah.
And we're just so not taught relationship skills. We're not taught to look after our emotions as a sovereign human being. And so we're always giving our power of our emotions out to someone else. He makes me crazy. How does he do that? He doesn't. You make you crazy, you know?
Yeah. That could be a hard truth to hear if you haven't been in this world kind of self-development or around a lot of life coaches. The first time you hear that, it's like, but what do you mean? But when you get into
Yeah.
it, there's so much power and personal power, and just realizing how much we can really define our own happiness and our own well-being when we start to take such total responsibility for our inner world and the way we show up with the outer world too. At least that's been my personal process as I'm on my own journey here of growth. I think it's a really hard pill
It
to
is.
swallow at first, but beautiful once you get it down.
Well, once you figure out how to do it, you know,
Yeah.
and that's often where, you know, people, because we're not taught any of this, right? And you can pick it up now, and there's way more self-help books than there ever were.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's consistently working with our socialization and our wiring
Yeah.
and the play between our cognitive brain, our executive brain here, and our primitive brain, you know, so it's showing up for yourself every day, you know.
Yeah.
So these little tips that I've given you are actually really quite easy.
Yeah. Yeah.
They, you
This is
know,
what I love.
they're on the action, and I can promise you will not believe the difference they make in one interaction, as
Yeah.
crazy as it sounds. Yeah.
It's tremendously encouraging, really, to think that just a little bit of awareness and a little bit of shift um, in ourselves can cause such different results in our outer world and our relationships. And I think that's one thing that just continually draws me back to coaching and the coaching model in terms of self development, is because it's not prescriptive. You're not telling people what to do. You're helping people to understand themselves better and giving them some new principles and guidelines to show up in our lives in different ways, which I personally really love.
There's a great comment that's just come in here.
Okay.
Is what you can control from Teachable Moments Financial. What you can control, actions, reactions, and mindset. What you can't control, everything else.
Yep. That's true. Thank you, John,
But
for
boy,
that.
we want to. We really want to.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah.
then John's a coach too. He's a financial coach. So he also is right in this kind of line of thinking, which is cool. Thank you for that, John. That's good. Well, I know we wanted to keep this to about half an hour, since we are going to go live every day, and we don't want to go too much in depth, so we can save stuff to talk about tomorrow. But for those of you that don't know, we have a group coaching program with Julia precisely around this topic of how to manage relationships, and we're doing it through the holiday season, so you can have some hand holding to actually begin to practice some of this stuff, put it into place, and get feedback, live feedback along the way. You can sense just from listening to Julia your absolute expertise and skillfulness in this topic. So there's so much to learn and grow from. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about what that program is going to feel like for those that haven't done a either coaching at all or a group coaching kind of format. I think it'd be interesting to explain that to them. And I'm hoping for those that have chimed in here, connected and listened, you can feel, if you've ever had that question, what's the difference between like therapy and coaching? I think you can feel that when you listen to Julia explain the approach of how she comes at this topic of, you know, criticism, toxic behaviors. It's not looking back necessarily at the roots, it's looking forward and looking at your thoughts and emotions to become, as opposed to focusing on the past to kind of pull up all those things. I did want to say that, but I'll pass it to you so you can explain a little bit more about what the program looks like.
Yeah, so it's a 2-month program. So Jamie, and we're going to actually start next week.
Right.
And the idea of doing it over the holidays is exactly because this is the time when we have all this material to learn from. It's about the best possible time. So in the first month, I'm going to have you all as highly reactive kind of little beings, and we're going to play with that, right? We're going to explore what it means to put the gap between react and respond right in the moment. Okay, you've got your Christmas dinner, or you've got all these different social events going on, so we can practice it in the moment. And I'm going to be there. We'll be coaching every week, so we can actually bring the examples and coach them every week. But we're also going to have a 24/7, well, call it 24/7 WhatsApp group between us, because it's a small group of us women. So the idea is that, in the moment you're at something and you're going to send a message to the group, and the group can support you on that and bring the learnings to life. So it's a slightly different, because we actually got the material in front of us and it's hot now.
Right.
So we walk through that in December. And then what we then do, and of course I'm giving you tips, real life tips as we go, but I'm starting to look a little deeper already, okay, to really show you what the future looks like, and where ultimately you bring your power back to you, so that none of this relationship stuff ever bothers you ever again. So I can promise you that. And then in January, we start looking at some of the real core concepts that will shift your mindset. And the one thing that I'm really passionate about is is something called the self-coaching, or how to coach yourself. And I talk about that on the Happiness Matters podcast a lot, because you want to be able to sustain this going forward, right? You can't hang on to a coach for the rest of your life.
Right.
And so I teach you the basic tools in how to start coaching yourself. So then you go forward from there. Awesome. So that's pretty much what it looks like. Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And Jamie will be with us as well. So it's a fun.
I will. I'm there to learn and share. And there's always so much to learn. This network of coaches within Lemon Rebellion is so precious and dear to me, because literally I'm just so happy to be able to like chat with you guys and learn from you all. And I really believe in this coaching model, because I've gone through it as well. How transformative it can be, and it's a beautiful thing, especially from these holistic perspectives that bring in the full self, the whole being happiness, because we're much more than just one simple aspect, right, to who we are and our well-being. So I love that, and I'm excited about this program. So if you guys have listened until now, thank you. I know we've seen Lisa and John and Paula and Diego and some others have come in and out throughout the call. Thank you for showing up and listening, and for catching the replay. Those of you that are watching this on IGTV or on Facebook or on YouTube, because we're going to put it everywhere. This program, Make It Through the Holidays, focused on relationships, starts next Tuesday, December 8th. Is that a Tuesday or Wednesday?
Wednesday is the 8th. Wednesday. Yeah.
All right, so we're starting next Wednesday, and again, we're going live every day now through Monday to talk about one of these 4 toxic behaviors in relationships, just as a build up to kind of get you feeling what are some of the things we're going to be talking about and working on, like you said, hot, live, in real life with our family relationships through the holidays. And it's going to be a really awesome program. You can see hanging out with Julia and working with Julia is an absolute pleasure. So we will see you tomorrow, same time, same place, and we'll get tomorrow. What are we talking about? We are talking about blame, right?
I think tomorrow we'll talk about defensiveness, actually.
Okay. All right. Tomorrow, defensiveness.
defensiveness. And we do a lot of that because it's the other side of criticism and blame, right?
Yep.
Someone criticizes you, we go immediately into defensiveness.
Oh, yes, we do. We'll have a lot of good things to talk about there. So, all right, everyone, thanks again for tuning in, and we'll catch you tomorrow to talk about defensiveness. Bye, Julia. Good to see you.
Bye. Thanks,
Bye.
everyone. Bye.
Everybody, bye.